Which role do you think is the hardest? What about the easiest? These are the questions we're going to be answering today, ranking every single role from hardest to easiest for Season 13. Now, instead of just making one generic list, we're going to be making two lists. One ranking the roles based on their mechanical or micro difficulty, and the other list based on the decision-making or macro difficulty of the roles. And just before we get into it, if you want to improve fasting at the rank you've always wanted, then go to SkillCapped.com. Stop wasting your time grinding thousands of games only to see no progress. With SkillCapped, you'll uncover the secrets to climbing ranks fast that only take a few minutes to learn and can be immediately applied in your next game. The best part is, it's completely risk-free to try, as you're kept safe with our rank up insurance. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Get the rank you've always wanted by clicking the link in the description below. Alright, now back to ranking all the roles from hardest to easiest, starting with the mechanical or micro list. The most mechanically intensive role in the game should not be much of a surprise here, as we have ADC. The fact that the role is largely reliant on dealing damage from auto attacks and positioning correctly to be effective gives it a very high skill floor. The role is arguably the most punishing in the game if you are not mechanically sound, because most ADCs are very squishy and die in an instant if they misstep. Think of it like this: if someone asked you what role they should pick up, they want to try and gain elo the fastest. Would you suggest they play ADC? We most definitely would not, as it's way easier to see immediate success on a top lane tank like Malphite than it is on mechanical ADC like Vayne. Following ADC is going to be mid lane. Just like ADC, mid has a lot of champions who are extremely vulnerable and require immaculate positioning and spacing to play to their potential. Mid also has a ton of champions who are skill shot reliant or require intricate combo usage depending on the situation. Unlike ADC though, most mid lane champions have ways to be useful besides auto attacking, whether it be from high burst damage or strong crowd control, which makes them a little bit easier to find success with right away. Even if you position terribly in a fight, lots of mid lane champs have one get out of jail free card, whether it be mobility or the stasis from Zhonya's. With ADC, you've got way less margin for error, as most ADCs can't build Zhonya's and a fair share don't even have a gap closer. For those reasons, we have mid as one of the more mechanically difficult roles, but it doesn't come close to topping ADC. Just in behind mid lane for the third most mechanically difficult role is going to be top lane. Without question, top lane has its fair share of mechanically intensive champions, but the champions played in the role as a whole are definitely more forgiving than mid lane. The most popular classes of champions played in the top lane are bruisers or fighters. These champs are going to be much more durable than your average mid laner and also tend to possess strong mobility, so positioning immaculately later in the game is not as important for the role. There are a ton of champions you can choose from in the top lane who pretty much just play themselves, like Malphite, Garen, and Cho'Gath. You can have the worst mechanics in the game and still succeed on these champs. Spacing well in lane and executing the correct trading patterns is still very important to succeed from top lane, which is why it's in the middle of the pack on our list. Not the most difficult role by any means, and mechanics are less important, but they're still very beneficial to have. Moving on to the bottom half of the list. In order to succeed with these roles, mechanics are definitely not the most necessary. Since supports don't need to farm, that's one massive external factor off your plate that allows you to focus on other aspects like positioning and trading. Mid, top, and ADC have to juggle so many more things, which can weigh on your ability to perform mechanically. For example, if you're playing Nautilus, all you're focused on in lane is looking for angles to where you can hit a favorable hook, while solo lanes and ADCs need to juggle farming and trading at the same time. Support also has so many champions that can be effective by just sitting back and using their point-and-click spells. As long as you're not positioning completely terribly and are sitting in behind your team, buffing your allies up with enchanters doesn't take the most mechanical skill in the world. Overall, your macro or decision making is way more vital to winning on most support champions, while the mechanical side of things are much less relevant compared to other roles. So you already know which role we have as the least mechanically intensive, and it's none other than jungle. In previous seasons, we may have ranked jungle differently, but with how much Riot has dumbed down the role in the past few seasons, mechanics are not as important to succeed. In the past, you'd actually take considerable damage from jungle camps, so kiting them out was a lot more vital. Nowadays, most champs can just clear without having to worry about how much damage they're taking from camps, since most of the time it's so insignificant. Messing up how you position while clearing your jungle is nowhere near as punishing as messing up your positioning as a laner. Of course, when ganking, you've got to be able to execute mechanically, but so does the laner that you're ganking for. If you've got terrible mechanics but love the strategy side of League, jungle is definitely the role that will suit you best. Despite jungle being our least difficult role mechanically, you cannot get away with having bad game knowledge and succeed in the role. Jungle is the role we have ranked as the most difficult to play from a macro standpoint. If you're someone who lacks quick fingers but loves weighing out which decision is best based on different circumstances, then jungle is for you. With all of the roles, it's often enough to just look at your matchup, think about how you want to play the lane, and you're set. With jungle, you gotta look at your own matchup and then also think about which lane will be the best to prioritize. Being able to adapt on the fly is also way more important for a jungler than it is for a laner. What happens if you get invaded? You've got to make a split-second decision or your game can be over. What if your plan is to gank bot lane, but then they die before you even get there? player. These sort of decisions are never going to be set in stone for each game, so it takes way longer to learn jungle from a macro standpoint than any other role. Based on macro, the role we have ranked as the second most difficult is mid lane. Mid being smack dab in the center of the map makes it one of the higher impact roles. If there is a mid lane gap where one player uses lane priority to roam while the other mid laner takes bad base timers, it will be felt. Sticking around in lane for too long and then running out of mana as a consequence is so much more punishable in mid than any other role. A mid laner with constant priority can completely take over a game. Same can't be said as much for top and bot lane. It's much harder for the enemy to punish poor wave management or base timers in top or bot lane since the lanes are more isolated. Keeping a constant eye on junglers and what they are looking to do is way more important as a mid laner too. If you're playing top lane and see that the enemy jungler is bot, you're free to play how you like, knowing they won't show up for a while. As mid, it doesn't matter where the enemy jungler is as they can approach you from either side of the map, so you've always got to respect a potential gank. It's really not a coincidence that the two roles most reliant on macro are the two that are almost always the most impactful for solo queue. Top lane is going to once again be placed in the middle of the list, and you could definitely argue it'd be higher up depending on the elo. Wave management up in top lane is extremely important and can make or break certain matchups. Not getting your wave pushed in under tower can be so much more punishing than mid lane due to the lane being so long. If you're forced to sit up close to the enemy's tower to farm because they've set a freeze, it leaves you so vulnerable to ganks, so knowing how to manipulate waves correctly is a core concept that is not super easy to learn. Our Master in Minutes course on wave control is a really great resource if you guys are looking to improve at that skill. With all that being said, the game is definitely not completely lost if you do mismanage waves as a top lane compared to mid. Macro knowledge as a top laner is definitely valuable for the higher ranks, but you can get away with decent macro in the lower ranks and still progress. If you're playing a tank top laner, you could die to a few ganks and still end up being impactful in team fights. If you die a few times as a mid laner though, it's likely the enemy mid is able to get a lot more done across the map after the fact, which is way more punishing to your team as a whole. Your decisions as a mid laner more heavily impact how the rest of the map plays out, which is why we have it rated slightly higher than top. Coming in at the number 4 spot for macro difficulty is going to be support. In terms of the role's skill floor, meaning how difficult it is to pick up and see results right away, support is not more demanding than other roles. You got less in your plate at all times as a support since farming is a non-factor. This automatically makes macro decisions much easier since you can be more focused on them at all times. Support is the role where you can know the least amount about the game and still find success. The only things you really got to worry about in the mid game is providing vision and sticking with your carries. Other roles have got to do this as well, but they also have to focus on catching side waves and rotating at correct times, while support never has to worry about that. Don't get us wrong, the ceiling of the role is definitely quite high, as roaming, placing optimal vision, and helping your ADC with wave states can take your game to a whole nother level, but you don't need these skills in place in order to find success with support. There are plenty of high-ranked enchanter players who win by simply placing average vision, sticking by their carries, and providing them utility at the correct times. So the role that we have ranked as the most mechanically difficult role is subsequently the least macro-dependent role in the game, being ADC. All you need is very elementary macro knowledge in order to win with ADC if your mechanics are on point. After all, the role is built to deal mass amounts of damage, so if you can consistently gain early game leads by outplaying your opponent, then as long as you're sticking with your team and taking fights when they're around, optimal macro play is not needed to win on ADC. Who needs proper rotational plays when you can just brute force 5v5s all game? Stick with the team and fight as a unit is really the only macro you need if you're a mechanically sound ADC player. This isn't to say that you shouldn't look to learn macro or get better at it as an ADC main, as you most definitely should, but compared to all other roles, bad macro knowledge as ADC is not going to be as much of a detriment in your ability to climb. So that's going to wrap everything up for this one, but if you want to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, then go to SkillCapped.com. With premium courses for every role and skill taught by the best players, SkillCapped is the perfect platform to help take your game to the next level. Take our wave control course. While you wait for your next game to start, you can learn freezing, fast pushing, slow pushing, bouncing waves, the list goes on, all in just a few minutes to maximize your improvement rate. Or maybe you just like seeing your opponent's health go to 0. Then you'll love our trading course. We even have a skill test at the end so you can see how good you really are. Players just like you are leaving 5-star reviews and raving at how helpful they are. That's not all we offer though, as every week we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All that seemed too good to be true? Well, don't worry, we're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Thanks so much for watching everyone, good luck in solo queue, and we'll see you in the next one.